Yes, it is indeed the case that I have a lot of slides, and well, we will see whether I will make it till the end of the presentation. And I have to start my presentation now. So uh, once I met Dan Oweus, one of the founding fathers of the research on bullying, and then he said to me, if you cannot come to the point, use PowerPoint. So that is what I will do now. So I made a PowerPoint presentation, and I'm trying to share it. This is the right button. And now it seems to work. So thank you again for inviting me for giving this talk at the Alberti Center for Bullying Abuse Prevention. And I would like to talk today with you about targeting persistent cases of bullying with network diagnostics. And this is the program that I want to go through with you today. So first, I would like to welcome you, and I would like to spend some time in introducing ourselves so that we get to know each other, so we get to know who is in this online group. And then the second chapter, I want to discuss the problem of persistent victimization. Then in the third one, I would like to go a bit more in depth with talking about bullying from a social network perspective. And then I would like to combine these perspectives into the fourth chapter, which is about facilitating the recognition of victims with social network diagnostics. So the ultimate goal of today is that we would be better able to recognize victims and to help them out of their poor situation. So Stephanie already said it. So in 2020, I was a very lucky recipient of the Early Career Award, and I was very excited to be the winner of this award. Also because I'm in a long list of very famous and very productive researchers on bullying. So I was really glad to be in this list. But it's also the case that I'm not the latest winner anymore, because in 2021, there is already a new winner, Anne Farrell, and I guess that someday she might also give this colloquium, and hopefully it's online so that I also can join it from the Netherlands. I was also asked to send around a picture to demonstrate that I was the winner of the Early Career Award, and then I sent around this picture. And you might notice here the wooden shoes. I think it was quite funny to wear them and to send it around to a lot of international people. But what I also wanted to have here in the background is the bee hotel that I made. So in my spare time, I really like to do some woodworking. I like to construct a lot of things like bookshelves, but also these bee hotels. And actually, this summer it was fully booked, so we had a lot of bees in this hotel. And at some moment, they flew out and they went to the flowers, and it was really wonderful. To see how that process is going. And at this moment, I'm here in the Netherlands, in Europe. It's a small country in the middle of the old continent. And more specifically, you see here a picture of the Netherlands, and our university, the University of Groningen, is located in the north of the Netherlands. And I am situated in a small village, some 15 kilometers below the city of Groningen. So it's quite wonderful to see that it is possible to give a live talk to people on the other side of the world, so crossing the ocean. And so far, everything seems to work really fine. I also thought it would be nice to get to know you a little bit more, and therefore I have a Mentimeter presentation, and this is the wrong code, because every time it generates a new code. So I stop sharing this screen, and I will start sharing another screen, and this one. So I would like to ask you to go to mendy.com and use this code 50673974. And the question is, just fill out where are you from? So I'm very curious from what location you are, whether it is in North America or somewhere else in the world. So please go to this website and fill out the code. And the nice thing with these word clouds is that the larger the word, the more people have filled it out. So, well, apparently most people are from Buffalo. But it's also interesting to see that there are people from Boston, Ohio, LA, Canada, which is, of course, very close to Buffalo. And it's also interesting that some people identify themselves as someone from the United States. So, and that has also something to do with your identity. So you can ask me, where are you from? And then I can say I'm from Groningen or from the Netherlands or from Europe. It says something about who you are and how you want to identify yourself. And then it might be that not all people have filled out this question, but I go to the next one. And I'm interested in your background. So whether you are from science or a school psychologist or a teacher or a student or whatever. So I'm also interested in, well, what is your professional background? So far the word student is one of the largest words, and also the background of social work and school psychology are quite prominent. And it's also nice to see people from psychology, clinical psychology, counselors, school social workers. So it's nice to have also people from a more practical background who probably are used to work with students. And then I return to my presentation. And it was not without a reason that I was asking you to share where you are from and also to share your background, because this is one of the fundamental questions that people often ask when they enter a new group. So who is in my group? And this is also a fundamental question for students. So when they enter a new group after the school holidays, or when they even start in a new school, they want to know who is in my group. And we think that if students get to know each other, that is quite a fundamental thing for smooth group formation. And this is rooted in the ideas of contact theory of Alport, but also in the stages of group formation. And that was founded by Tuckman. And there is also a saying that says, unknown makes unloved. And we think that when students get to know each other and get to know each other's background, so where are they from, what kind of family they were born up, but also what are their interests, what are their hobbies, we think that it really would facilitate the forming phase and the norming phase. So it would also not only facilitate that that a group would form and that people will form relationships, but it would also allow teachers to work on the norming phase. So it would make it easier to talk about the social norms and what they would like to see in a classroom. And I already told you about a hidden talent of myself, so it was the woodworking part. Now the idea is to go into short breakout groups of a few minutes, and the breakout groups are 4 or 5 persons. And then the question is, so please tell something about a hidden talent of yourself, and it may be a talent that you are proud of that may be unknown to others. And then it's also interesting to see that there may be some others in your group that also share this talent. So this is a kind of a thing to, so we are quite anonymous now in this virtual session. But this is quite a thing to get to know who is in this group. So I hope that the breakout groups can be started now. And I hope that we can initiate it. So I'm not sure if everyone returned. I was also in one of the breakout groups, and I really liked it to hear some of the hidden talents of the others. And I think it quite confirmed me in that it's good to get to know who's in your group. And we integrated this idea into the anti-bullying program we are developing right now, and that is the GRIP program for secondary education, and it's an abbreviation in Dutch for Group Processes, Identity and Bullying Prevention. And also in a recent study, we also found that it's quite important to spend a lot of time in the first weeks of a school year to make a group out of the classroom, because we found that the relative social position that children attain in a group is quite stable over a period of 2 years of secondary education in the Netherlands. So we classify children into four groups. So children could be high bullies or decreasing bullies. So they started with a lot of bullying, but then over the course of 2 years, they decreased their bullying. They were uninvolved or they were victims, but luckily over the 2 years, the victimization decreased a little bit. But you can see here that the levels of popularity, perceived popularity, are quite stable over the 2 years. And also, if you look at the number of best friends that the children have, so in general, it's quite stable. And when you look at the intercepts and slopes, they do not differ much between the different waves. So we think that this study is really a signal that it is really wise for teachers to invest in group processes in the first months or even in the first week of a school year. So now we get to know each other a little bit more. It's time to go to the second chapter, and that is the problem of persistent victimization. But I think it's also good to talk at least a little bit also about some good news, and that is the good news comes from the implementation of Kiva in the Netherlands. So we implemented the Kiva anti-bullying program in the Netherlands in 2012 to 2014 in a randomized controlled trial, and we had training for teachers. We had team lessons in a manual. We had indicated actions when the teachers could use when they thought that some students were victimized or were not really attached to the group. We had a monitor, so teachers could see, could get some information about who is in the group and who is not really attached to it. And we had several meetings and extra education to professionalize the teachers. So the research was already 6-7 years ago, and thereafter we did a national rollout in the Netherlands. And currently, out of the 6,000 primary schools, 400 are using Kiva, which is about 7%. And well, that is quite something we have achieved, because in the Netherlands there is a lot of competition of several anti-bullying programs, where most of them are not empirically investigated for effectiveness, but still schools, well, do not pay so much attention to it. And when they think that they need a program that has not a scientific background, they are allowed to use it. But turning back to the research, we had 66 intervention and 33 control schools, and the children were in grade 3 and 4 in the first implementation year, and then in grades 4 and 5 in the second implementation year. And this is what the results look like. So at the pre-assessment, so before the Kiva program was implemented, you see here the percentage of children that reported being victimized. And it was quite high, it was over 30%, but what is quite important here is that there was no difference between control and Kiva schools. And after 1 year, you clearly see a drop in the number of victims in both control and Kiva schools. And also after 2 years, and the drop in victimization in Kiva schools was significantly larger than in control schools. So in control schools, the percentage of victimized students dropped with over 50%, but in Kiva schools it was 64%. And these are the odds ratios related to these percentages. So in general, in control schools, students are about 1.5 times more likely to be victimized than in Kiva schools. So that is, well, the good news of the experimental research. And then we also did a cost-benefit analysis where we investigated, so what are the expected revenues of reducing victimization among children, and do these expected revenues outweigh the cost that schools and a society has to make to implement Kiva? And it turned out that every euro we invest in a program like Kiva in the Netherlands, on the long term, leads to 4 to 6.5 euros returns. And this was quite a conservative estimation, because the only revenue that we looked at was the lifetime income reduction of victims. So that was one of the outcomes that was quantified in a study before. And we didn't look at many of the psychological outcome measures like depressive symptoms or social anxiety or fear or problems with parents or with teachers. So we only looked at the lifetime income reduction of victims. But on the other side, on the cost sides, we assumed a maximum effort of schools. So we assumed that schools implemented Kiva, implemented all the lessons for the maximum number of hours that were related to those lessons. And we assumed that schools did it perfectly, which was certainly not the case. So this return on investment of 4 to 6.5 euros could even be higher. And then we also investigated the long-term effects. So here you can see the Kiva effect that I just described. So that Kiva schools had less victims after 1 and after 2 years. But in the randomized control trial, the control schools were allowed to use Kiva for free after being on the waiting list for 2 years. And you clearly can see here that there is a Kiva effect for control schools after the first year. So when the control schools were allowed to use Kiva, they also had a significant drop in the number of victimized students. And the third effect that you see here is that there is a remaining effect. So in general, the percentages of victimized students stay relatively low compared to what they used to be. So that made us to conclude that Kiva is a program that is effective for most children, but apparently some children remain victimized. And that is what we call persistent victims. And Tessa Kaufman, who was one of our PhD students, she wrote her whole dissertation about persistent victims. And I want now to share some of her results with you. And this is what she did with some latent group analysis. So she looked at victimization trajectories in Kiva schools. And then she found out that about 80% of the children were not victimized over the course of 2 years. So that means that about 20% of the children were victimized at the start of the program. And of those 20%, 15%, so it is 80% of the victimized children, they were helped, whereas only 20% of the children, so it's really a small minority, but still 3 to 4% of the children became persistent victims. So they were not helped by the program. And then we were, of course, interested. So can we find some characteristics that would help us to disentangle or to make a distinction between the victims and the non-victims? And it was not so surprising that comparing victims with non-victims, we saw a lot of difference in social problems. So victims were more rejected, were less accepted, had less friends, were less popular. So that is not really surprising, because what is most interesting is what differentiates the chronic or the persistent victims versus the decreased victims. It's the chronic is wrong, so it should be decreased versus persistent victims. And what we found that was that the persistent victims, they had clearly higher levels of peer rejection than the decreasing victims. So they had even more problems within their group than the victims who were helped. And we also found that the persistent victims had higher levels of social anxiety and more depressive symptoms. So they had clearly more psychological problems than the victims who were helped by the Kiva program. And then finally, quite to our surprise, was that we found that the persistent victims had also more problems in their relationship with their parents. So the persistent victims reported less parental warmth and more parental rejection, and especially for the mother. So the persistent victims had not only more problems in the classroom and not only more psychological problems, but they also experienced problems at home. So this is, of course, a very sad story. So the children who remain victimized also have difficulties in other situations. And then you can think of, what are the potential consequences for these victims that are not helped by a successful program like Kiva? And then we had some theoretical reason of, what could it do for those persistent victims to be victimized in a school that is so clearly anti-bullying. And from the victim's perspective, you can say that, well, they make a comparison between before and after. And they saying, so, we started with the Kiva program, and then I was victimized, but also some others were victimized. But the others were helped, and I am not helped. So that is, of course, damaging for their the psychological well-being. And then also from the perspective of attribution theory, if they think that they are the only one, then they think, well, it must be me. So if children are victimized, but there are many other victims, well, they can put the blame to the bullies, and they can say, well, it could be them, it's their problem. But if they are left as the only victim, then they attributed the consequences and the reasons to themselves. So they say it must be me. But also from the peers' perspective, we reasoned that being a persistent victim is quite damaging for one's mental health. So being a social misfit relates to the person-group dissimilarity model. So if there are many victims in a classroom, then victimized children, well, in some way they fit in the group because many children are victimized. But if they are, the leftover victim, then they become more and more dissimilar from what is normative in the group. And we also know from research that victims usually defend each other. And when there are less victims to share, the plight of the victims, then the victims will find less support because there are simply less other victims that can defend them. So that brings us to the healthy context paradox. So the success of an anti-bullying intervention like Kiva that would create a social environment that strongly emphasizes the reduction of victimization. And then we hypothesize that, well, that success of a program like Kiva is quite detrimental for the children who are the remaining or the new victims. And that is also what we found in our research. Here is the results for the depressive symptoms for children who are victimized. So they can be victimized not at all, once or twice, and then monthly, weekly, or daily. And here the straight lines are the control and intervention schools at the baseline. And then at that moment, there is not much a difference between the two lines. But after 1 year of implementing Kiva, you clearly can see a difference. So the children who have the least depressive symptoms, well, those are the children at Kiva schools who are not victimized at all. So that is, well, the majority at the Kiva schools. But those with the most depressive symptoms are the ones who are victimized the most at Kiva schools. So this is quite in line with the hypothesis that, well, being victimized leads to a lot of depressive symptoms, but even a little bit more in schools that are clearly anti-bullying. And we found similar research for self-esteem. So the children with the lowest self-esteem are the victims at Kiva schools or the intervention schools after 1 year of implementing the program, whereas the ones with the most or the highest self-esteem are the children who are not at all victimized in Kiva schools. So Kiva has positive effects for the self-esteem and for the depressive symptoms of children who are not victimized. But for the remaining or new victims, well, there are some adverse effects of an effective anti-bullying program. So overall, the well-being improves for the children who are no longer victimized. But the victims who remain, they are relatively worse off. So the supportive school context is clearly unfavorable, is clearly an unfavorable environment for remaining or new victims. And those children are at risk when they are marginalized by their classmates, or when they are having psychological problems or problems at home. And we think that others do not want to associate with them, and that might also be one of the arguments for why they are not helped. So the children who are helped by the program are the ones who may have some problems, but not to such a high level as the ones who are not helped by the program. And then it's time for a new breakout session, a new breakout group. And then the question is, what do you think of, this idea of persistent victimization? And maybe you can share with the others some of your experiences. So, is this problem of persistent victimization, do you recognize it in your research or in your daily practice? And maybe you can also discuss some of the potential solutions. So I'm not sure if you can hear me again. I was a bit lost in cyberspace, so it was quite silent for a few minutes. But I can see some people saying that they see and hear me. So I hope this was a fruitful discussion. And well, if you think that you have discussed some things that are worth to share, well, maybe you can send them later to me by email, or you can share them in the final 10 minutes when we have a Q&A. Because I would like to continue with the next chapter of this presentation, and that is the idea of bullying from a social network perspective. And my background is from sociology, and in sociology is quite known for its research on networks. And often I had to explain what is a network. So we say a network is a graph when there are a set of actors or nodes, which can be children or companies or teachers or internet pages. And those actors, they are connected through ties, and those ties can be friendships or trade exchange between companies or links. But nowadays, it's quite simple to explain what is a network. So we simply refer to the social media like LinkedIn or Twitter or TikTok or whatever is popular right now. And then everyone knows immediately what is a social network and what we meant by it. And in network research, there are basically two kinds of relationships. So the first one is the undirected relationship. So you can think of romantic relations or business relationships. So if person A is in a relationship with person B, well, then it's quite strange that person B would say that he or she is not in a relationship with person A. So that is an undirected relationship, but many of the relationships are directed, and you can think of friendship nominations, but also of bullying or victimization ties. So one person can nominate another one as a friend, but it does not necessarily has to be reciprocated, because well, what is a friendship may differ between children. And well, that also applies to bullying. So it is, of course, sometimes something from the perspective of the persons involved. So some people may say, well, it's just teasing, while the other would experience it as bullying. But given that in bullying relationships, the power imbalance is so important. It's quite unlikely that bullying is reciprocally, so it's going from both sides. So most of the times it's going from one side to the other. So bullying can be seen as a directed relationship. And then, well, there are some perspectives on getting information on bullying. And what is often done in research is that researchers make use of self-reports. So then they ask children, how often have you been victimized, or how often have you bullied others? And what is also quite popular is using peer reports. So then researchers ask, so which classmates are victimized or which classmates are bullying others? And then we aggregate those nominations, and then we have a bit of an idea of, well, who is in the perspective of the classmates, a victim or a bully. And if you combine those perspectives, so the self-reports and peer reports, then you approach what we call network reports. So then we asked children, by which classmates are you victimized, or which classmates do you bully yourself? So that's clearly a self-reported question. So children report about their own experiences, but they also report about the behavior of others. So they clearly indicate which of the classmates or schoolmates are targeting them, of which classmates do they target themselves. And these relationships, these network relationships, do not only have to be collected for bullying or victimization, but they can be collected for many relations, like defending, so which classmates defend you when you are victimized, but also for friendships, so which classmates are your best friends, or whom do you dislike? So in essence, all these questions are network questions because they provide information about relationships at the network level. And this is also what we did in our research in Kiva schools. So here you see the network of bullying relationships and defending relationships. And the interesting thing here is that it's not only at the class level, but we also collected these relationships at the school level. So children were not only allowed to mention classmates for bullying them or classmates for defending them, but they were also allowed to mention children in other grades. So here you can see children in 4 different grades. at one time point. So you can see here who is nominating whom for bullying and who is nominating whom for defending. Well, and it's quite difficult to analyze this visually. And it even becomes more difficult when you realize that we did this longitudinally. So we did it a few months later in the new school year, and we did it also exactly 1 year later. So you can see here the development over time of the bullying and defending relationships in one school. And what we did with these relationships is that we used the program Siena, which is a program for analyzing longitudinal social networks. And we investigated the patterns of the co-evolution of bullying relationships and defending relationships. And then this is the situation that, we would expect to find quite often. So we have victim I, who has a bully, but also who has a defender. And what often happens is that we found this situation. So we have two victims, and one of the victim nominates the other victim for defending. And both victims are victimized by the same bully. And then you can wonder, so how did these children end up in this situation? And there are basically two paths that can be used to obtain this situation. And the first one is this one, and we call it social support or victim selection. So we have two victims who are at time one victimized by the same bully, and then they realize, well, we are both in the same position. Maybe it is wise if we help each other, and maybe we stand stronger against our bully. So the victims select each other as friends or defenders, and you can see it as a sort of social support. So first we have two victims with the same bully, and then at some moment the victims start defending each other, or at least one of them defends the other. But this is also a situation that we have found, and that is that at time one we have a victim who nominates a classmate as a bully, but the victim has also a defender. But then the bully retaliates the defender, and then at some moment the defender becomes also a victim of the bully of the victim that was defended by the defender. So this is clearly retaliation, but you can also call it victim influence. So if you associate with victims as a defender or as a friend of a victim, you may run the risk to become victimized yourself. And then later on, we expanded these models with ethnicity and gender. And then one of my former PhD students, Marianne Hoijsma, she did this, and then she looked at these triangles, so these relationships between three persons. And then she also looked at the node characteristics or the individual characteristics of the children involved here in the defending relationship. And she found that defending did not increase for victims sharing bullies. So if victims were victimized by the same bully, they were not more likely to start defending each other. However, defending did increase for bullies who were targeting the same victim. So you can also have, quite an opposite picture of this triangle when these are two bullies. And when these two bullies target the same victim, then the bullies will also find each other and start a friendship or start to defend each other. And then Marianne, she found that cross-ethnic defending, so defending between children with a different ethnic background, that it increased for children of the same gender, for children who are in the same classroom, and for shared bullies. So bullies with a different ethnic background defended each other and associated with each other, and then target together one of their victims. But cross-ethnic defending did not increase for shared victims. So victims were not more likely to find support with other victims with another ethnic background. So this was in brief something about our research on bullying and social networks. And then it's quite interesting. So what do you think of this social network approach to bullying? So can you come up with some network research questions concerning your own research or practice? Or maybe you have suggestions for some new research questions in bullying research that, well, you can start yourself, or maybe that we can initiate. So would this social network approach, would it be helpful for your own research? So I hope you were able to exchange some fruitful ideas of, well, how to think about your own research problems or problems in practice when using a social network approach. And then the final chapter of my talk is about using social network diagnostics to better recognize victims in classrooms. And what we did in our research is that we provided a network feedback to teachers. So we provided feedback about social relationships. So we would help that it would facilitate recognition of those vulnerable children and persistent victims. And we hoped it would stimulate teacher interventions. And the feedback was based on a student questionnaire, because we think it's important to provide teachers information about how students feel at school. And well, some instruments also provide information on based on teacher questionnaires, but we did not want to provide information to teachers of how they think things are going. And we provide reports at the group level, because the Kiva approach is on empowering, well, the group. And we inform children at the start of the online questionnaires that the teacher would receive feedback, and we use a child-friendly film for it. So children are informed that their answers to the questionnaire will serve as input for a report for teachers. And we also explicitly say to the teachers that the report is for the school, so teachers are not advised to share the information with parents or with children. And we also instruct teachers to be careful with sharing the information from the report. So it's not that teachers should say the report shows this and that and say it to children or to parents. Because we think that the information that we provide to teachers is part of a broader observation and signaling. So it's simply one of the tools that teachers can use. So we provide them with a monitoring tool that I will explain in the next slides. But we always say to teachers that they also should use qualitative information. So they when the report shows that some children are not feeling safe at school, or that they are victimized, or have no friends, then it's always wise to have first conversations with students or even with the parents before teachers act. And it's also very important for teachers and other school staff that they have observations, so they observe what is going on in the classroom. And this is then an example of the information that we provide to teachers. So here in the first column, you see the names of all the children who are in a classroom. And then you can see here the number of nominations they receive for certain network questions. So you see here that Anna, she is mentioned by 3 classmates as their bully. So there are 3 classmates who mention Anna as a bully. And then Liz is another a child, the first child on the list. And there is no one in this classroom who mentions Liz as a best friend, whereas she is disliked by 8 classmates, which is very high, because the classroom average of received nominations for being disliked or rejected is between 2 and 3. So 8 is clearly above average. And then here there is a child who's called Sophie. So she indicated with self-report victimization questions that she is victimized, and she also indicated that she didn't like to go to school, so she had a very low level of school well-being, so which is indicated in the final column. And then we also provided teachers information on the social reputation. So we provided information teachers on who is considered as perceived popular, but also who is considered as a good leader. So here, for example, Jaden is seen as a good leader by 9 classmates, and then he is seen as a good leader by most of his classmates. And then there is also a question about pro-social behavior. So that question is like, whom helps you with when you have emotional problems, or whom helps you with practical problems. And well, with this information on the network nominations that children receive, we hope that the teachers have a good overview of what is going on in their classroom. And it can be even accompanied by providing teachers a social network. So here, for example, you see the network of the reciprocated friendships. And the children I just discussed, so Sophie and Liz and Anna and Jaden, well, they are have a red circle around them. But also all the others can be looked up in the table. So you can have a bit of an idea of what is the social position of these students. And then it turned out, and this is an example classroom, so the structure is quite nice, which is quite helpful, of course, for discussing it in meetings like this. Well, these are the popular boys, and these are the popular pro-social girls. And then here are some students who indicated that they are bullied, and well, these are the bullies that are mentioned by them. And here are some well-liked students, and there are also some students who are quite neutral. So they have some friends and are now and then disliked, but everything quite effort. So they are not really outstanding. And then the question is, so what would be a good solution for this classroom? So maybe you can make an analysis and you can think of intervention strategies that you propose to help the children in this classroom. So what would, according to you, be, well, the best strategy? And if you think, well, I need more information about this classroom, you can find at this link, and I can put it in the chat. You can find some better readable prints of the network feedback that we provide to teachers. So in the chat now the link. So I hope you are enthusiastic about this network approach and this network feedback that we provide to teachers. So we are quite enthusiastic about this approach, and so now I only introduced it to you in 5 or 10 minutes, but for the teachers in half of the Kiva schools, we train them for 4 hours in how to read this report and what they can do with it. And the teachers were really enthusiastic about it. And we had 2 Kiva conditions in our research. So we had regular Kiva schools, and those Kiva schools, they were provided with a basic report. So only it was saying that, well, there are 3 victims in your classroom of 25 children. And the Kiva Plus schools, they received a plus, and that was this network feedback report. But we did also a test of effectiveness, and we found no significant differences between those regular Kiva schools and the Kiva Plus schools. So it seems that simply providing teachers with feedback is not enough for well, changing the atmosphere in the classroom. So teachers apparently need to translate the feedback into specific action plans. And that is what we are working on right now in new research. So we are more or less forcing the teachers to go through the intervention cycle. So first, we want them to identify how the group is doing, for whom of the children there are signals. And then we want them to understand how this problem of the group or the children, how it can be explained. And then they should decide on what interventions could improve the situations. Then they should implement them. And then they should also reflect on it. So has the situation improved? And we hope that with this new intervention cycle that teachers will really be able to translate the feedback into actions in the classroom. So the conclusion of my talk is that, well, we cannot be satisfied with simple reductions of victimization because there are always some children who remain victimized, and we have seen that for them the situation becomes even worse. So what is needed is continuous effort, awareness, and commitment. And then you may wonder, why is here a picture of a vacuum cleaner? So what we tell the teachers is that they should continue the use of Kiva or of another anti-bullying program. It's the same with a vacuum cleaner. So you can buy a very good machine that is really effective in taking away the dust. But if you have a machine, it's not enough. You really have to use it, and that also applies to anti-bullying programs. You should do the lessons. You should talk with the children, and you have to do it systematically. So not once a month, but on a weekly basis. And what is also important with vacuuming, but also with tackling bullying in classrooms, is that you have to look at the difficult spots. Well, taking away the dust in invisible places is not so difficult, but it always remains there at positions where it's difficult to take it away. So behind the couch or whatever. And you can compare it with the persistent victims. So these are the children who may be seen as difficult, but they clearly need our help because, well, they are really in a bad position. So thank you for attending this session. Thank you for your contribution, and of course, thank you for the Early Career Award. I think I managed to do well with my presentation within time. And for the people who have some questions, I will stay here and try to answer them.
Thank you so much, Dr. Huitsing, for your really exciting presentation, and it was so great to be interactive. I know we're 1 minute past time.